It's been a minute since we've seen all of you, but we are back and ready, and we have a very awesome author that we're going to be talking to today, Kit Frick, who wrote I Killed Zoe Spanos.
Most recently.
She's written other things.
Yes. See All the Stars was her debut, which I am very excited to talk to her about. All Eyes on Us, and she's got a fourth coming soon. That's all we know. And amongst many poetry books.
Yes. So we are going to play her trailer real quick, and then we will be ready to chat with her. So watch us.
Thank you for joining us today. I can't even tell you how excited I am to have you on this show, because I have read every single one of your books, and I am just so ready to talk about all of them. All of them.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited.
So a little bit about you. You have a few accolades behind your name. I mean, besides just having almost 4 books out, in poetry as well, you hold an MFA as well, and you just have a whole laundry list of things that you do that we are enamored with. We just want to know how you find the time to figure out how to do all this amazing stuff in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. I'm impressed with myself now. So yeah, I do have an MFA. I am one of those overeducated writers that studied writing in college and then got a graduate degree in writing. And whenever I talk about my MFA, I always like to emphasize that it is absolutely not necessary in terms of being a professional writer. I got a lot out of my MFA program. I mean, I feel like, there's something a little intimidating about like the MFA. I got a ton out of my program and I loved it, and I got 3 years to write, and it was definitely a solid decision for me personally. But I focused in poetry. I do feel like it was very useful to me in terms of putting together a full-length collection of poems, and that's A Small Rising Up in the Lungs, which did get published a few years after my MFA program, but there's very little relationship between that and my young adult fiction career. I did take a couple of craft classes in fiction, but I never did fiction workshops. I didn't really study fiction from a like MFA or workshop standpoint ever. So, I'm overeducated in writing, yet mostly self-taught in fiction, if that makes any sense.
I would say, there's a lot of good authors out there, but like your writing, you can tell that that you have, a passion and background in poetry, because it's so descriptive and I mean, just it's very visual and beautiful. Yes. Like just in a fiction, like I don't know. I felt like I was on the beach and I saw everything, and it was really, really good. You could just tell that your love for like words and the language and stuff like that was all in there.
Very vivid. And
thank you. I mean, this is straying this is straying now from your original question. I will remember to get back to time, which is what you actually asked about. But there is, I do think there is a relationship between focusing on the craft of poetry and writing fiction on a line level. It definitely didn't, my writing education did not teach me how to plot a novel. It did not teach me about character development. Not that those things can't be taught, but I did not study them as a poet. So those are things that structure, plot, characterization, storytelling, like all of those key tenets of storytelling are really something that I learned through reading mostly. But when it comes to thinking about the way words interact with each other on the page, it really comes into play for me in revision most saliently. I do listen, I read aloud when I'm revising. I have the computer read to me. I do think that all of those hours spent focusing on diction in poetry and focusing on, line breaks and that sort of small minutia of poetry writing has had a payoff in my fiction writing when it comes to like that fiddly revision level editing. Time. Which is what you originally asked me about. So I made the decision to leave my full-time desk job in 2016. So I have been working from home before we were all working from home. I was ahead by a couple years. And I didn't and still don't write full time. I am an editor for an independent press, Black Lawrence Press. I edit the chapbook series, so that's short collections of poetry and prose. And I manage 2 contests a year for Black Lawrence, and then also read all of the open reading periods, so the non-contest submissions and chapbooks. And I acquire and edit 4 to 5 chapbook titles a year. So I have that, and that I've been doing since I started working with Black Lawrence. I think it was in 2009, and then I became the chapbook editor in 2012, I think. So I've been doing that since then. And so that's a part-time job. I also work with independent editorial clients for Copper Lantern Studio, which is my my like freelance editing side hustle, which is great. I get to work with authors who are usually most of my clients are authors who are either pre-querying, they're working toward that, or they've been querying and they're taking a step back to developmentally work on their novel and get back in the query trenches. So most of my clients are pre-published. And so when I first left my desk job, I had about 5 other things that I was also doing freelance. And I have now at this point pared it down to just Black Lawrence, Copper Lantern, and writing. And that feels like a big achievement to have 3 jobs. So,
but you also are a Pitch Wars mentor as well.
Yes, I do.
And that's no small feat.
Yeah, I love Pitch Wars. I've done it for 4 of the past 5 years. And I've met some amazing mentees through Pitch Wars. This year was really fun because I got to co-mentor with one of my first mentees from the first year that I was mentoring. So she came on as a co-mentor. And yeah, so I've done, I feel like Pitch Wars, I'm not going to be able to do it forever because it is such a time commitment, but it's been so worthwhile to be able to work with emerging writers in that way as well.
Did your mentee get picked up yet?
So my mentee from this year is still querying. She has a bunch of queries, bunch of fulls out. So I am rooting for her. And my previous mentees, I think all except one are agented now. And the one that is not went in sort of a different direction with her career. Yeah, I've had everything happen with mentees from like immediate from the showcase at the end of Pitch Wars, immediate offer to didn't sign with an agent on that book that we worked on for Pitch Wars, but went on to write the next book and signed with an agent on that one. I always say to my mentees that the biggest thing that you get out of Pitch Wars, I think, as a mentee, is you get a really intensive crash course in revision. And it's like we don't have crystal balls in terms of what's going to happen with finding representation after Pitch Wars. But I always feel confident that my mentees leave knowing how to revise. They've leveled up their writing, and they're going to keep going, even if it's not through the Pitch Wars showcase, which I don't know what the statistics are, but I think it's, it's certainly less than half of mentees that sign with agents immediately from the showcase. They're sort of all different experiences, but everyone revises and levels up and keeps writing. So, and everyone makes connections with other emerging writers, which I think is equally valuable. Yeah, that like even for not get like I applied to Pitch Wars with See All the Stars before I was agented because I wanted to work on revising it, and I did not get in. But I met some of my best writing friends now through that Pitch Wars community. Even though I wasn't selected as a mentee, it was still super valuable. And then after I did sign with an agent, I applied to be a mentor. And so, even without being a mentee, it's still been a really valuable community for me.
And do you keep those relationships like with your mentees? Do they, contact you? I mean, the ones that you've had before, is it kind of like, we're here for this period and then,
Yeah. I'm still in touch with all of my mentees to varying degrees. Like some I don't hear from regularly, but I'll get like updates from. I have one mentee that now that I've moved to Pittsburgh is actually fairly geographically close to me. And I was looking forward to meeting her in person, and then the pandemic happened. So I haven't reached out in a while because that plan to meet up in person has not happened, but I'm seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, I hope, in terms of in-person interaction. So hopefully I'll get to reach her. I know, like fingers crossed. It's been such a long year.
Please.
I know. So yeah, I mean, it definitely depends on the mentee, but I love keeping those relationships definitely beyond the contest, and I think most mentors do. I don't think any of us are like, okay, contest is over, bye.
Bye.
And you were finishing, I guess. I didn't see, but you were finishing your first draft for your next novel right before that. I mean, while the Pitch War stuff was happening, but I think you had said you turned it in kind of right before they were announced.
Well, you were revising because it was announced. I'm just going off of your newsletter here.
What are we talking about? My fourth book? Or are we talking about
the
this
fourth book?
Yeah, I mean, this long,
please tell me.
Oh my goodness, this long line of timeline, girl.
Most of my schedule.
That was crazy. Because along those lines, I was reading this, kind of how you broke down how you were doing, the fourth book, editing that, and then your uncontracted novel and working on that and revising that and everything. You said in here that you, for your the fourth YA, that you said you wrote your first draft in 9 weeks. So, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. But my question is, how much time before you like literally sat down on the computer and blah, 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 like were you planning that out so that you could write it all in 9 weeks?
This book is a really bad example of my typical process. So let me preface it with that, because the truth is, like, I had a kernel of an idea, like maybe 3 or 4 sentences about what the concept would be for a while before I started writing. I came up with that at some point during the promotional period for I Killed Zoe Spanos, before Zoe had been published, but we were like I was in like full on like promo mode for that book. I had the kernel of the concept. So like maybe that had been kicking around for like 3 or 4 months before I started writing. But that is really all I had until about a week before I started drafting my 4th book. And that's not normal for me. Like my typical process involves a good several months of various forms of brainstorming. I love the craft book Story Genius by Lisa Cron. She has some really great character development stuff that I have pulled from her book and created my own worksheets for, that I will use to do some main character development work. And I don't do outlining to a like crazy degree of detail, but I do tend to outline at least like a bare bones structure before I start writing. So I usually have, several months of planning. For this book, we were on a serious timeline crunch because I was supposed to deliver this book full draft to my publisher by, I don't know, many months before I had started writing it, right? Like I was really, really um, 2020 happened. So I'll put that out there. That derailed a lot. I had another book that I was working on that I thought was going to be my 4th book that just did not come together, and I ended up scrapping. So that set me back timeline wise a lot. And then Zoe happened, and there was more promotion and publicity for that book than I have had for any of my other titles. So I think I failed to adequately realize how time consuming that was going to be based on past experience, both because everything changed in March last year, because that book was coming out in June. And suddenly all the plans that I had, like I thought I was going to be doing a bunch of festival and promotional stuff in the fall. Often with summer releases, there's not a lot of that going on in the summer. So if you're doing festivals or book conferences, often it's spring or fall. So I thought I had a lot of stuff in the fall, but not a lot in the summer. And then that all changed because everything shifted to virtual for the pandemic. And so all those fall events went away, but they were replaced with a ton of podcasts and video broadcasts and live virtual panels and that sort of thing. So my summer got crowded in a way that I wasn't really anticipating until maybe 2 or 3 months before Zoe released. So a lot of things happened that just exploded my usual writing process for the 4th book. So I had like a long marination period on a kernel of an idea, and then about a week of real brainstorming, and then 9 weeks of drafting. And then I had this extended deadline from my publisher of getting it in by Thanksgiving. And at that point, it was clear that like if I wasn't hitting that Thanksgiving deadline, it was getting bumped like another season. So yeah. So that's how that happened. But the good news is, despite all of that, it was a really smooth drafting process. And so now I'm like, maybe I've been wasting all this time
just sit down and write,
Right. Like, why was I even doing that for other books when I can just like spend a week brainstorming and then draft it in 9 weeks? So I don't know. I don't know what the lesson here is. It'll probably never happen again in that way.
Well, I mean, first off, congratulations on Zoe being so big during a pandemic.
2020 did not kill her.
No.
No. Barnes &
Yeah.
Noble YA book pick.
I mean, that, everyone was so afraid of everything dying, because of the pandemic and all this stuff. And then, here, Zoe was like rising to the top and like summer pick and everything. And that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, 2020 was a weird, wild ride in many, many ways. And that's like kind of a flip way to describe the pandemic. I'm not talking about the lives lost and the health crisis that we're in. I'm really just talking about my publishing journey in that way. I don't know how to describe the pandemic in that way. But I went from, with this book, the last week of February, I flew to New York. I had an in-person meeting with my publishing team and my agent about the marketing and publicity plan for I Killed Zoe Spanos, which felt very fancy. I'd lived in New York for the publication of See All the Stars and All Eyes on Us. And I had never I'd had a phone call with the team before, but I'd never been invited into the office for like big in-person meeting with the whole team. So first of all, I was feeling extremely fancy. And
a little stressed.
That was the last week of February. And I was like, yeah, we're doing all the stuff, this book, like things are so exciting. Like we have all these plans for it. And then literally the next week, it became clear that a lot of that was going to change. And so from March through June, it was like, week to week talking to my publicist, like, okay, we're not pitching this book launch event in New York anymore. Like, we're going to try to figure out if this store can do virtual, and does this store even have any capabilities for that? Because, all throughout the year, I think we've all become much more savvy. But, at the very beginning, it was like a lot of stores were like, virtual event. I mean, we never thought about that before. So that was a lot to just sort of like roll with. But then at the same time, as you mentioned, some really exciting things were happening, like the selection for the Barnes & Noble YA Book Club, which, thank you, Barnes & Noble. That definitely, despite all of the store closures and all the disruption to business as usual in the publishing world, the publicity from that book club was invaluable. And, some like pie in the sky things happened with this book, like a feature in People magazine for like their summer book picks, which was definitely beyond what I had dreamed of in terms of publicity for the book. So it was like a real high-low time. And and that also all just messed with my writing process, because it was a lot to deal with on top of all the regular life things that we were all dealing with at that point as well. So it was memorable.
Yeah, right. Well, and Zoe's now part of the Literati box, right? She's in there.
Yeah,
that's fun.
Yeah, I just learned about that last month, I think. Yeah. They started a new, I think this is their first teen box. I think they have boxes for younger kids. But they put together a subscription box for teens. So it was part of the first teen box, which is cool.
But it's not surprising that this would be in Literati, because my daughter is auditioned to, represent the younger version of that. And
Oh, so cool.
the books, I mean, they're, like they're up there. They're not just like, like little like, not that anything's wrong with like rhyming picture books, but I mean, like these are highly intelligent, yeah, there's several different, like, cause I like to get book boxes for my daughter too. And so there's several different ones that you can choose from. And like literati is definitely like higher scale, like understanding and concepts and stuff like that. So for them to go teen and then put your book in there, with just like the writing and how I talked about the language and stuff in there as far as being so vivid and everything, it's not surprising that it would be part of
higher
literati.
reading comprehension. For sure.
Oh, that's so. I feel like you know more about them than I do. Now I'm like, oh, it's extra cool.
Yeah, no, they're definitely up there, I would say, with the types of books that they put in there.
Well, and speaking of Zoe, how did you come up with the idea for this novel?
Yeah, so that is a book that had a much longer gestation period than this fourth book that I unfortunately can't share much about yet. But all will be revealed in a couple.
We'll
months.
Be retweeting.
But for I Killed Zoe Spanos, I am an avid true crime podcast listener. So that was definitely one thing that I was thinking about when I was coming up with the concept for I Killed Zoe Spanos. There had been, at the time that I was beginning to brainstorm the book, there had been a couple adult market thrillers that had woven in podcasts. But Sadie hadn't been announced yet. There had been nothing yet in YA that I was aware of. Now that I think I've read every podcast book at this point, and there had been a couple that had worked a little bit with the podcast format before, but I wasn't really aware of it. And I was thinking about podcasts, and I was thinking about Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, which I had reread, and I kept thinking, what if Rebecca, the title character in that novel, had gone missing today in the true crime podcast era? Rebecca is a affluent socialite in a posh seaside London suburb. She's a society woman. She's absolutely someone who would be focused on if she went missing she would be a woman that would have all sorts of media attention. She would have a podcast about her. So
you quoted something from that in here, right? Yes. I was like, I know that name. Yeah.
Rebecca.
For the stable on part 2. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. They're all. So I Killed Zoe Spanos is not. It's not a retelling of Rebecca. The plot really takes its own path, but it was absolutely inspired by Rebecca, and there were all sorts of Rebecca Easter eggs, like the one you just identified, scattered throughout the book. So my what if question going into the concept of this book was, what if Rebecca De Winter had gone missing in the true crime podcast era? And what if it was YA? And what if it was set in, a posh seaside suburb of New York City instead of London, which gave me the Hamptons setting. I was living in New York at the time. I'd been living in New York for 2 decades at the time when I was writing I Killed Zoe Spanos. So all of those details sort of clicked into place. Once I had the that what if question and the setting and the literary inspiration, that's where that idea came from. And I pitched it to my agent, and she was like, yes, write this book. And I did. And we sold it to my editor at SNS, and that is how that book came into being.
My question.
Well, Sarah listened to the audio version of it.
Yes. Now, did you have any like input in that at all? Because once I started listening to it on audio, like I was like I had the book open and I was listening to it, because when you have the podcast portions, it sounds like a podcast and like the interviews, and it was so amazing. But the way you wrote it in here, it was as if you like knew that that's how the podcast would have been done, because you put like little things in there about the music and like this and that. Is that like when you wanted it to become an audiobook? Like, did you have that like premonition that, or is like just, I don't know. I was just like loving the audio version so much.
Yeah.
Well,
They do a
different
really
characters,
amazing.
too.
They did an amazing job with the audiobook. I'm so happy with how it turned out. I would say I had the hope that I wanted full cast narration for the audiobook. I wanted them to produce the podcast chapters in a way that they would sound like an actual podcast. But the book was like completely written through copy edits by the time we were submitting it to audio publishers. So it didn't influence the writing of it. I think the what you're pointing to, like the little sections that say like, you know, theme music fades in, or you know, those little podcast signifiers, that was not intended as a cue for the audiobook director, although I hope it was helpful to them, but more for the reader of the print book to, I'm like touching it and it's out of the
I was too.
but to give the experience to the reader of what that would sound like. It was so fun writing the podcast sections, because as a really avid podcast listener, it came really naturally, because I feel like I had all those, like the way a podcast should sound tropes in the back of my mind when I was writing. So it was a little bit like getting to dabble in a new genre of writing without actually leaving the pages of fiction. In terms of having any say in the production of the audiobook, I mean, I did insofar as we had several offers from different audio publishers. And so I got to participate in, you know, selecting which audio publisher we would go with. And I did express to them that I very much wanted a full cast narration for the audiobook. And I think that was actually written in as part of the deal, that they would be doing full cast narration. And I did get to listen to audition clips from audiobook narrators when they were putting it together. So yeah, I've had audiobooks done for each of my 3 books, and it's been a little bit of a different experience with each one, because I've worked with a different audiobook publisher each time. But this was super fun, because it was this full cast that did it. And in addition to the podcast sections, there also are different narrators for the chapters that are read by Anna, the chapters that are Martina, etc. So yeah, it's a really, really nice audio.
It was really good.
Twice.
I know, like, it might have ruined other audiobooks for me.
Oh no.
In the future, I'll be like, oh, you guys totally could have done this better.
One person.
Why are we changing voices now?
Well, kind of piggybacking, going, I guess, sort of backwards in your books, All Eyes on Us. You know, it's funny, because whenever I read one of your books, and I just, for whatever reason, and I think it's because somehow you have tapped into my teenage/20s life. Because there's like a little piece of something in every single one of your books, minus the murder, that has happened yet in my life. And I remember when I read your debut, See All the Stars, I just connected to it. I read it in 2 days, because that scenario actually happened to me. And I don't know about, a lot of girls have that.
Like a friend split up.
Yeah, well, because there was a boy, and you know they did. But But I was just mesmerized, and of course by the writing as well. I remember texting you saying, "Oh my gosh, this writer is just phenomenal," because I was just like, I mean, you could recite the ABCs, and I'd just be like, more, please. But it did, I mean, there was that story of Ellery and Matthias and that first love. It was really that just went back to that first love and how that kind of came to fruition, and then that heartbreak that came with it, and then finding out who that heartbreak is because of, and I was just like, oh, that happened to me. So I understood. It was very relatable. And then your second book, All Eyes on Us, it was interesting because the two main characters, they've got this one boy between them, and they end up connecting to each other and becoming friends through this disaster that happens. And again, that was my 20s. That happened in my 20s. So I'm like, what is next?
Really
Tapping in.
Well, she says number 4 has something to do with a boarding school. So have you been to a boarding school?
Well, and I probably should have been sent to a boarding school because I was not the best teenager. I told that
maybe
line.
This is your story never told.
It might be. I mean, my parents really should have sent me. I was not a good girl. And they'll tell you. But yeah, I just want to tell you that I appreciate all of they've really sucked me in. So I cannot wait until the reveal of the 4th. I'm on pins and needles.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yay.
Well, after that. Maybe you've tapped into my adult life.
I know. Yeah. Well, you'll have to get back to me. Once book 4 comes out, you'll have to let me know what I have secretly plucked from your life.
I do. I just connect. I connect immediately. So bravo. I love it. I love it.
Are they based off of experiences you've had, or just like kind of, the typical general things that, teens go through, that we all kind of go through?
Right. Both. See All the Stars that was my debut that has the friendship breakup. So that is the only book of mine that really has any autobiographical elements beyond just like, those weird like throwaway lines that like your best friend always says that, and so you have to like incorporate it into dialogue as an Easter egg for her. All of my books have little bits of real life in that, but nothing nearly as dramatic or traumatic as happens in See All the Stars occurred in my high school experience. But there was a big best friendship group breakup that was part of my high school experience, and really defined the last 2 years of high school in a big way for me. So, nothing specific beyond that made it into the book, but it was certainly inspired by the real experience of having a friend group split up, and then also by an early adult experience of a friendship ending. So both of those things played into the creation of Ellery as a character and the kernel for what that book's plot would center around. I don't think there's anything like that in any of my other books where I can point to a specific life experience, but all of my books do in different ways address female friendship and complicated female friendships. So like you mentioned for All Eyes on Us, Rosalie and Amanda, the two protagonists in that book, are not only are they not people that you would not expect to be friends, but there's friction between them at the beginning of the book. And they sort of become unlikely allies at a certain point. And in I Killed Zoe Spanos, Martina and Anna, Anna is the protagonist, but Martina is certainly a close secondary protagonist and driving force. She runs the podcast. She's the teen podcast host that is trying to get the truth about what really happened to Zoe. And, they also have this fraught friendship where Martina is suspicious of Anna, yet also wants to help her if it's the case that Anna's confession, the book opened, this is not a spoiler, the very first chapter, the book opens
by the
Anna
way,
confessing to playing a role in Zoe's death. Thank you. So Martina is both suspicious of this and wants to help Anna if she's innocent, yet wants to seek justice for Zoe. So all of my books deal with these complicated relationships between teen girls. So in a way, while there's no, autobiographical particular that they're drawing from, I think they do come down to those same female relationships, both the really amazing and wonderful ones that I have in my life and the friendship splits and fraught relationships from my teen years and from the past. So yeah, I think I will probably continue to write about complicated friendship among especially female teen characters. That's probably going to be a recurring element in my writing.
Well, I really enjoyed what you did with Rosalie in All Eyes on Us and her story. And kind of, it was set, of course, in the present, but you backstoried it. And so I got a bigger glimpse at her struggle and her conflict and the stakes that she has involved in her story with her parents and the church. But you didn't do that with Amanda. And so I really got that deep connection to Rosalie, being able to see further into her life. Was there a reason you didn't do it with Amanda, or you just...
That's interesting. No, I don't think it was a conscious decision to dip more into backstory with one character than the other, save for the fact that I think where Amanda is at story present was much more easily summarized in a couple sentences, whereas Rosalie's story involved, I felt, so much more background experience that really needed to be brought into the narrative. When we meet Rosalie, she is at what she feels is a stable, leading to good place in her life, but she hasn't always been there. And so we get these flashback scenes that help contextualize her current relationship and the fake relationship that she's in a real relationship with her girlfriend Paulina, but she is in a fake relationship with a boy to keep her parents and her church off her back because they have previously put her through conversion therapy. And so that's what we're getting to see through flashback. So I really felt like contextualizing how Rosalie has arrived at the current moment involved a lot of work into backstory that Amanda's scenario, which is much more, she does have sort of more than meets the eye in terms of how you first meet her as a character. She's the queen bee at her high school, and that's sort of like easily summarized. And her parents have a much more precarious financial situation than most of her town is aware of. But again, that was sort of easily woven in through a few threads and story present and didn't really necessitate a lot of backstory. So yeah, I think it involved the individual needs of the character and their storyline. And that's
I did
those
enjoy Amanda. You know, when eyes weren't looking, she kind of became who she really wanted to be. When nobody's looking, I mean, she was in the car smoking pot. Nobody's gonna see it, right? So might as well. So I did enjoy getting to see her character arc change throughout as well, without that backstory. So I mean, it was just good all around. But again, I really did enjoy being able to dive deeper into Rosalie's story, because it was such an important story to tell. So I could see why you would choose to kind of focus more on that.
Yeah, and I think that's also a good point about, for Rosalie, it has a lot to do with her recent past and then her present, whereas with Amanda, it has a lot to do with the image that she's projecting to the outside world and then her private life. And so we get to see more of her, more of who she is on the inside through story present, through scenes where she's able to let her guard down. So again, that's like, you know, just different narrative strategy for different characters.
A question about Zoe. So you said you were living in New York at the time, which, you know, you could definitely tell, like, you knew where all the places were. You know, I've never been to New York and desire so desperately to go. But we looked up, we tried to find if there really is a Heron Mills. Is there, or did you just, like, because you drew a whole map? I mean, you've created the whole little city, which I thought was really cool.
That was another really cool element of this book, is the map. And I asked the map illustrator to design it so that it would look like one of those, like if you go to a beach town and you go to the little like tourist info booth and you get a walking map or a welcome map. I wanted it to have that feel. No, Heron Mills Village is fictional, but it is based on real towns in New York's Hamptons. So I was not living in the Hamptons. I was living in Brooklyn, but Brooklyn is very close to the Hamptons, and I had a couple opportunities to go out to the Hamptons. I'd been before for a friend's wedding and for like a beach vacation. But I took one specific research trip for the book, best research trip. Like,
right? It's for research, right?
So hard. Hard.
Gotta go to Scotland for research. I'm gonna just start saying that.
But that was really important for getting down a lot of atmospheric and textural details that are not the type of thing that you might be noticing when you are there for a friend's wedding. Like, I was paying attention to architectural styles and to the way things smell and, all those sort of little details that I wanted to work in. So, I feel like the next book that I write, I need to pick the setting by like where I want to
go. Yeah.
Where I want to go on like post-pandemic vacation, and then be like, oh, it's so terrible, I have to take a research trip.
I know we talk all the time about wanting to have a setting at like a ski resort, like it's some beautiful log cabin up in the mountains, woods. Like nobody in sight. No. Just
way to do it. I know. And you write thrillery stuff, right? That's a good thriller setting.
We do, yes. It is. It's suspenseful.
We've done a lot of things in the woods, yes.
You can tell we really like those.
We really want to be in the woods.
During snow.
Yeah, they are always cold.
Being from Houston,
we just dream of cold weather.
It's funny because we did get a taste of it, as you probably saw us on national news.
Yeah, you sure did.
We obviously can't handle it here, but
we're not built for that. And nor do we share energy with other people.
But it was nice. It was nice until all the power went out and our water got contaminated. But until that time,
it was really good.
It was nice.
Things started to go down.
And it was just snow.
Yeah. About 10 hours in. Yeah. It wasn't so fun anymore. Yeah. But
no, that sounded so scary.
It was an adventure,
It
that's
was.
for sure.
It
It was
was.
an interesting little
But you know, it's
addition.
kind of like one of those things. It's like, you know, what else is going to happen? You know, I mean,
We can handle this.
it's going to rain for all of us. I don't, you know, it's something crazy is going to happen. But
Go for it. Try us. Try us.
but yeah, definitely choose a. I mean, I was all about it because I'd never been to New York, and I was like, oh, now I want to go even more. And we want the ice cream. Like,
oh my gosh, the ice cream. Is that real? Did you have that flavor?
I mean, it's a real flavor. The ice cream shop I made up, but yeah, I feel like I've had that flavor. I actually pulled the ice cream shop from, there was an ice cream stand. So not exactly like the ice cream shop that exists in I Killed Zoe Spanos, but there was this ice cream stand called the Little Treat Shop in Cortland, New York. And so this is about an hour from Syracuse, where I did my MFA program. My husband was in a PhD program at the time, and so he was in Binghamton, I was in Syracuse, and so we lived in the middle in Cortland. And there was not much in Cortland except for there's a SUNY there, so a State University of New York school, and there's cows. I mean, it's very rural. There's this like little main street that has a couple bars and restaurants, but there's not much. But they have this amazing roadside ice cream stand called the Little Treat Shop, which I highly recommend should you ever find yourself in Cortland, New York, for any reason, or driving through Cortland on your way to Ithaca or Syracuse. Go to the Little Treat Shop. They had a really amazing peanut butter ice cream there, and the detail that the owner, Mr. Jenkins, of this ice cream shop gives about putting hard chocolate candy at the bottom of a waffle cone so that the ice cream doesn't drip. I'm sure that the Little Treat Shop did not invent that. That's like a common ice cream trick, but I learned it there, and so that's like one of those real life details that I plucked out and put in the book for Jenkins Creamery. Oh man, I want ice cream now.
yeah, right.
Like, what do you have?
I'm lactose intolerant.
I feel like I have some vanilla in the freezer, and that's it.
Yeah. But no, it was so good. I mean, it really kept you guessing the entire time. I mean,
Yes.
I wish I could spoil the ending and say, but I mean, like, wow. Like, up until, I mean.
I kept asking, do you know yet?
Right. She kept, yeah, because she finished.
Oh, wait, Christine, you read it first? And
she's a much faster reader. I am like the slowest reader on the planet.
You give me a Kit Frick book, and that's today.
Again, going back to the time I have in my life, I don't, I homeschool my daughter. At least I did this year. I don't know if that's continuing, but it happened this year. But yeah, so time. So she just flies through books, and I'm like, But so yeah, she finished, and she's always telling me, she's like, where are you? What's happening?
I need to talk to this book. I need to talk to you about this.
And I'm like, but,
why aren't you reading?
Yeah, right. Stop texting me so I can read. But yeah, no, it keeps you guessing. Literally, I mean, like I even once one of the big reveals was given. Like I was like, well, did I miss something? Did they answer the question? Like who did kill her? Like. And then it got there, but I mean, it was almost like the end, like the very end. And I'm like, oh my God.
But on that note too, I wanted to kick myself because I was like, she gave all the clues, right? And I totally just kept reading. And I was like the absentee father right there. There's one. Right there in the beginning.
Don't give
the coerced confession. I mean, good job.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm always glad to hear readers say like something that I like labored over to like try to make sure that this worked. When people are like, "Oh, it was so successful! Like this worked," and like, "Oh, yes."
Yeah, I mean, like as a thriller writer, that's your whole thing. Like keep them guessing to the very, very end, and it was accomplished.
Yes.
My favorite reading experience when I'm reading a mystery is when I get to that twist or reveal or whatever, it is toward the end of the novel. And then I immediately want to go back and reread and see. And then
Did I miss
you
something?
find all these things. You're like, it was right
Right there.
there.
Oh.
It's not signified something else. And so it's not like I was a sloppy reader. I didn't miss it.
Yeah.
It's just I thought this wasn't important, or I thought this meant one thing and then it turned out to mean something else. So yeah, that I'm always working toward that kind of
It's always the one you least suspect.
Yeah.
I want it to make sense.
Yeah,
Like
that one was not on my radar.
out of left field, like, oh, and the lady at the grocery store was the killer. I mean, that's
Yeah.
making no one's actually done that.
Right.
Like, there's but when you can't go back and reread and see, oh, those clues really were there. There was a way, there was a path to piece this together, but I didn't go on that as the reader. That is disappointing to me. So I'm always working toward ensuring that is not the reader's experience. But I can't be the reader of my own book, so it's
So
Yeah, I was like dinner
good to
listening
hear
to the
others that
audio
think
tape, and I like just yell, like when something was revealed, I was just like, "What?" Like I was just like, "Dude," I'm like, "What?"
burned all your
I'm
stuff.
like, I was like, "Did I just hear that right?"
Rewind.
But yeah, going on not being able to be the reader of your own stuff. Okay, this is something that we find challenging. Is you talk about, again in this timeline, having a lot of beta readers and this and that. Where have you found like your solid, honest
Hardcore.
being, honest being the key there. Beta readers. And like, do you use the same ones for all your projects, or do you alternate, or where have you found these people in your life? I mean, you've been in the writing world more so than probably we have, but so you probably have a lot more friends in that area. But I mean, like, in the beginning, let's say, where did you
So I was another thing that I got out of my MFA experience was the experience of having my work workshopped by other people and hearing a variety of feedback from classmates. And you sort of learn through the experience of being in workshops both how valuable feedback can be, and also that all feedback is not created equal, and not every person that gives you feedback is going to be a good reader for your work, and not all feedback is necessarily going to be the right feedback for you. So I think that through that experience, I really did learn a lot about the value of finding good readers for your work. So, of course, as I've mentioned, my MFA was in poetry. So it's not as if I was able to just pluck the great readers that I had found for my poetry and be like, okay, now you're going to be beta reading.
Way
So that didn't quite happen. But I think that Pitch Wars, going back to Pitch Wars, was really the single greatest source of critique partners and beta readers for me. I've met most of my, not all, but most of my consistent critique partners through Pitch Wars, either the year that I was applying to be a mentee. I made connections with other writers then. And then also as a mentor, I connected with other people that were writing YA thrillers and mentoring YA thrillers, and then connected with them that way. So yeah, Pitch Wars has really been the gift that keeps on giving in terms of making those connections. I do not use exactly the same beta readers for every book, mostly because of time. Like, we're all super busy and not everyone is able to read something at the time you need something. So not all of my CPs are involved in critiquing every book, but it is good to have a group, especially once you get to the point where you are publishing and have contractual deadlines and that sort of thing in the mix, because being understanding of others' time is definitely a part of the process. So yeah, I think, oh, and then there's another big way that I met other beta readers, my debut group. So once I had the contract for See All the Stars, I was able to join the Electric 18s, which was the my debut year's group. And through that group, which was a Facebook group, but also because I was living in New York at the time, I had the added benefit of being in like a hub where a lot of us happened to be located. So there were, I don't know, 20 some of us in the New York metro area that had first YA or middle grade books coming out in 2018. And so we started up a monthly happy hour night in the year before our books came out. And then we all went to each other's launch events. And so I met through both that New York in-person group and through the larger Facebook group other writers who were also similarly writing age category genre. And so some of my other betas have come through that. So it's been different communities at different stages of the writing process. But yeah, I think those have been the biggest sources for me.
So you talked about your process already, but for aspiring authors and those who are trying to query and go the traditional published route, I mean, what are maybe 2 to 3 things, just advice, that you could give them that they should try or look into, not necessarily have to, put into their process to help them become successful?
Yeah. Well, I think this is actually a good segue back to your first question about time and time management. For me, that was really important when I was writing See All the Stars, because I was at the time working full time at NYU. I was an academic administrator. And then I was also editing chapbooks for Black Lawrence, same as I am now. So I already had a full-time job and a part-time job. And then on top of that, I was trying to write and then query this book. So I found that I need to schedule my writing time in a very methodical way, the same way I schedule doctor's appointment, time to do homework when I was in school, anything that involves making a time commitment on your calendar. I have treated my writing in the same way. And that means saying no to brunch plans, or because a lot of my writing, especially then, still now, but especially when I was still working at NYU full time, my writing happened on the weekends. I was too exhausted to write after work. I'm not one of those 5 a.m. writers club, hours to anyone that can do that. I cannot drag myself.
I'm just up until 1 o'clock at night.
Don't get me wrong though. I don't enjoy it
either. I am no good at writing late when I'm tired. I'm no good at dragging myself out of bed to write in the morning. The only thing that works for me is weekends. Now I have some more flexibility in my schedule and I can actually write on the weekdays sometimes, which is a real treat. But weekends are still my big focus time. And it has gotten easier now. This is a benefit of being published. People in your life take you more seriously when you say, I have to write, like it is my job. Like I'm now privileged in that others in my life understand that being a writer is my job, and that means actually having to schedule time to put my butt in my chair and write. But that was a lot harder when I was an emerging pre-agented, pre-published writer because even friends and family who love you, and it's not that they don't, I mean, maybe some don't respect you and what you're doing, but like often it seems like a hobby, no matter how serious you are, when you don't have like the credentials to back you up. And so the biggest piece of advice that I would give, aside from read widely, I mean, read widely, both in the genre and age category that you want to be published in, but also outside of it, like get to know the market, but also take in interested, if you want to be writing YA fiction, also read like nonfiction that interests you, take in all sorts of media. That's an easier piece of advice to give. The harder thing is being extremely precious of your writing time, scheduling it, saying hard no's when, something else that is fun and social comes up that is during the time you have scheduled. And then I cannot give you advice on how to then manage your social relationships with the people that you're sorry cannot come to your kid's birthday party that is on Saturday afternoon because that's my writing time. That is unfortunately on you to figure out that. But yeah, being really precious with that time and scheduling it and sticking to it is the biggest thing. I definitely, it took me longer. We talked about writing this fourth book in 9 weeks. It took 9 months to write the first draft of See All the Stars. And that's not even many people work for years on a first novel. It's not even as if that was a super protracted time. But the only reason I was able to get a draft in 9 months was because I scheduled chunks of my weekend every single weekend during that time. So yeah, it's really into it.
How many hours did you sit on a Saturday and write? How did you schedule that out?
I usually schedule out long chunks on 8 hours on a Saturday and maybe a half day on a Sunday. And that changes depending on what stage I'm in. If I'm drafting, I have a shorter attention span than I do once I'm revising. I can really dig into developmental revisions and I have sort of I need to be cut off often. For drafting, I can't just draft chapters at a time. Even if I have a lot of hours, I run out of steam. But yeah, usually it's, a full day and a half day on a weekend is about what I blocked out when I was drafting See All the Stars.
And we know today is one of your writing days, so we appreciate you coming, taking a little bit of time to talk to us today, because we don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you.
So unfortunately, I had to get up much earlier than I normally would on Saturday because we had an electrician come this morning to give us an estimate. So I had to set my alarm and get out of bed. I felt very resentful about it. But it all worked out well because then I was meeting with all of you at 5. So I got my writing in. No worries.
Well, it looks like, according to your schedule, that next month should be pretty open for you.
Yes.
Yes, the schedule that they keep referring to, this is something I put out in my newsletter, which if you all are interested, at pushrick.com, you can subscribe to These Little Secrets, which is my monthly newsletter. And then you can get things like my writing schedule for the course of.
Which again, to me, goes back to the whole time. I'm so impressed just now I at least understand when you write, but you're active on social media. You have the blog that's on your website, the newsletter, the website in general, writing. You have interviewed other writers, editing where you are editing for these other people, plus pitch wars thrown in there. It's you're very active on some things, and I'm like, does she contract out? Does like somebody else do her, like social media, like, because I mean, I could spend hours, like, oh, I got to respond to people on Twitter, and then I've got Instagram, and it's like
so many.
Honestly, I feel like I'm not very good at any social media. Maybe someday I will hire an assistant. But I do try to stay. I enjoy Twitter and Instagram, so those are the two platforms that I'm the most active on. But I don't. I do not feel like I have cracked those nuts. But yeah, I mean, I am a little bit of a workaholic, I think is the answer. And the pandemic has fed that in some ways. Like in the first several months, it really like threw me for a loop. And then once we all sort of settled into a new rhythm, suddenly there was nothing competing with, like the there were no social events or friends' birthdays, and everything that did happen was happening online in a compressed time frame. So like if I'm hanging out with my group of friends, which I do value doing over Zoom during these past few months, like there's no like traveling to New York to see them or even like going downtown and spending an evening out. It's like hopping on Zoom for an hour. So it has, the way our schedules have changed, it's really affected everyone in different ways. Like you mentioned homeschooling your kid. I don't have children, so I'm not dealing with that very difficult element of pandemic life in the way that others are. So it has sort of opened up time in a way that has allowed me to lean into juggling these two manuscripts like I wrote about in that newsletter post. But that being said, I'm really looking forward to things competing with my time again. Like I welcome that. Please world, bring that back.
Yeah.
It will be slightly less productive.
Yes, hopefully soon.
I don't know. I think I've discovered that I'm more of an introvert in this pandemic than I ever knew about myself, because I'm like, well, I'm good staying inside. I'm all right. My family actually got COVID over the Christmas holidays, and it's like when everyone thinks you have the plague, like they don't even. I'm like, well, I don't have to go to any Christmas events. I don't even have to spend it with my family. Like I can sit here on the couch, and even though I feel like crap and could die, like no one's fighting for my time. Like it's good. So I definitely have discovered my introvert self in the pandemic.
I hope everyone's okay.
Oh yeah, we're good. We survived.
It's been a whirl.
Yeah,
for sure. It's been an interesting new normal and everything else, and I mean, I sent her an Amazon care package.
Yeah, those are nice
because I couldn't come over.
Yeah, so we had an interview we had to cancel too. Yeah,
yeah, that's right, we did. And the author's husband actually had gotten COVID too. So
Christmas was a bad time.
It really was.
Yeah,
interesting time. Yeah, unfortunately.
But well, thank you so much, Kit. It was amazing to talk with you and just hear your brain. Your brain.
Everything.
We are very, very excited for book number 4. Yes. I'm even more excited about whatever this uncontracted novel is in another genre, and just,
pins and needles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things are going.
Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at KitFrick. While I am not brilliant at either, I do provide important book updates. Yeah. So you will be sure to hear about book 4 and all future books when there are things to share about them on both of those platforms.
And we will have links to all your current books in our description for all of the viewers to be able to go.
Amazing.
Yes.
And the Little Thrilling Bookshop, is that a local bookstore that you are supporting?
That is a bookshop.org, just like online space. So that, yeah, right. So through my website, there's a link to Little Thrilling Bookshop, and it's just thrillers that are both YA and adult market that I love and recommend. And it's a bookshop.org space. So
we will have a link to that as well.
Awesome.
For sure. All right. Well, thanks again. Like she said, I can't
Thank
wait.
you.
We'll be looking out. We'll be stalking your Twitter.
Yes.
We are ready.
All right. Take care. Stay safe. And we'll be
Get writing.
Yeah. Enjoy your time off while you have it.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sarah and Christy.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Love
All
her.
right.
Love her.
Woo!
Awesome.
That was very fun. Thank you for having me.
Well, we, gosh, to put a face to the words that you read is always just so surreal.
Yes.
Next month, in actually just a few weeks, we have author Wendy Hurd, whose new YA thriller is coming out March 31st.
Mm-hmm.
So we will be talking to her about that and her past books as well. So be looking for information for that on our Twitter. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Just hit that subscribe button and you will get all the updates from us as well. What else? What did I miss?
I don't think anything. I think you got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was awesome. Lots of good information. I'm just processing. But yes, looking forward to Wendy Hurd's book. This is, I was processing while you were talking,
Yes,
so I apologize.
she's too pretty to burn.
But yes, it's her first YA.
Yes.
Yes. Did you say that?
I did.
Okay. So, yeah, and it's coming out on the 30th, and I'm going to have to read really quickly. So, I won't be on social media. But yes, we're very excited about that. And yeah, everyone have a lovely Saturday.
Yes, please do. And the rest of your month. Enjoy.
Yes. Stay safe and healthy.
Signing off.
Bye.